Good evening, everybody. This is the Select Board meeting of Tuesday, July 14th. And let us start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Anita.
Anita.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
to the
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I just need to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded, so everybody needs to know that, and also remind everybody who is listening, if you would please put yourselves on mute. That will help all of us and will make the sound much better. So we have a couple of items for open forum. First off, congratulations to both Tom Clay and Anita Torkin-Wynn. Welcome back, Tom, and welcome, Anita. We're real, it's gonna be an interesting year for all of us, but welcome to the board. Speaking of elections, I would, and the board would like to acknowledge and thank Patty and Andrew and all of the folks in the town clerk's office for managing this election season. They had to manage mail-in ballots, counting, coordinating those, as well as managing the polls and the polling places on election day and coordinating all of that. They did a fabulous job, and we want to thank them. They deserve a couple of months respite before this all starts up again for our primary in September and then our national election in November. So if they have even a couple of weeks respite, from election cycle, it's well earned and well deserved. I also want to announce for people that there are currently 2 vacancies on the FinCom committee. And if you are interested in serving on FinCom, then please go to the town website and download a citizen's application form and fill that out and submit it. The FinCom is appointed by our newly elected town moderator, Angela Harkness. And so if you are interested, get your application into her. And then finally, we have 3 men tonight who who have a combined 126 years of service to the town of Westford, which I think is pretty remarkable. We would like to honor and acknowledge all of them and their service to the town tonight. So in light of we're talking about 126 years, this is going to take a little bit of time tonight. But first off is Phil Mcgee. And for 31 years, Phil has been a town registrar. And since 1995, when he first stepped in to fill an expired term and was appointed at that time. He has been serving as a registrar since then, and that includes 6 presidential elections, 4 town clerks, and countless town elections, recounts, tabulations, and introduction of various electronic voting machines at the same time. He's been chair of the Board of Registrars since 2002, and at this time he is retiring, and we want to thank Phil for his years of dedicated service to the voters of Westford and to ensuring that our elections ran smoothly. So thank you, Phil. Our second individual is Paul Davies. Paul has served as a volunteer for 50 years. For the last 20 years, he served as a member of the Permanent Town Building Committee, being one of its original members when the committee was first formed. During this time, the committee has overseen the construction and rehabilitation of Town Hall, the senior center, Rodenbush, and the new fire station, among other of its projects. Prior to being on the Permanent Town Building Committee, Paul served on the Permanent School Building Committee, on which I had the pleasure of serving with him for a period of time. As a member of the Town School Building Committee, Paul was involved in the expansion and the rehabilitation of Nabnasset School, the expansion and construction of the Westford Academy, and the construction of both Blanchard and Stony Brook Middle School, as well as the Crucifulli and Miller schools. Other committees that Paul has served on include the School Building Needs Committee, the Cameron Senior Center Needs Committee, the Planning Board, the Development and Industrial Commission, which was back in the 1980s, the Historic District Study Commission, again back in the 1980s, the North Middlesex Planning Commission, the Route 110 Master Plan, the Stony Brook Master Plan, the Westford Visions Committee, and the Westford Academy Alumni Association. For 50 years, Paul has given his time, his energy, and his expertise to the town, and we are grateful for his years of dedication and service. And finally, if you think 50 years is a long time and that it can't be beat, well, then there's Hayo Kessler. Hayo has served and volunteered in this community for 51 years. He's been a member of our school committee, the Cable Advisory Committee, the Neshoba Valley Technical High School School Committee, and the J.V. Fletcher Library Board of Trustees. He served on the Neshoba Valley School Committee from 1996 to 2008. During that time, he attended 166 meetings. He brought new ideas and innovations to the school. He was an original member of the Superintendent Liaison Committee. He was a member of the Building Committee, serving as its chair from 2003 to 2006. As a library trustee, Hayo has served as both the chair and the treasurer. He's been an instrumental member of the Trustees Investment and Trust Funds Committee, and it was Hayo who back in January first raised issues concerning the coronavirus that led to the library reviewing its pandemic policy and ensuring that it was prepared for COVID-19 and how it would conduct business in a time of the pandemic and the virus's impact. We all know that Hayo is never afraid to express his opinion. And we all know that Hayo does his research about various issues before he does express his opinion. And while Hayo may be retiring from his volunteer service in the town, we fully expect that we will continue to hear from Hayo and that he will continue to participate in the town's activities and to make his voice heard and his opinions known. All of this despite his, quote, retirement. To all of these gentlemen, on behalf of a very grateful town, we say thank you. Thank you for your years of dedication, for your commitment to our town, for your service to our town. Our town is a better place for all that you have given to us. Thank you, gentlemen. So, with that, I think, does anybody from the board have anything else for open forum? Okay. Seeing none, let's move on to our 7:05 item, which is a brief recap of the July 7th virtual community forum with the Westford Police Department and a continued discussion concerning the Select Board's commitment to and potential actions to address racism, discrimination, xenophobia, and hatred. Tom, do you and or Anita want to start in terms of just recapping the forum and where we are and right now and what follow-up actions at least are anticipated from that?
I have a couple notes, but Anita, do you want to go first?
You can go ahead. That's all right. I'll just follow up.
Okay. Well, first, thank you. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the town staff. Thank you to the chief, the deputy chief, and all the attendees. There was a large group of attendees. There were many, many questions that came up. I think all involved felt like it was a beginning of a good conversation that I hope will be very constructive and will lead to greater diversity, inclusion, and equity in Westford. There are a lot of questions that you posted. We made a commitment during that session to get you answers. The organizers of that session, which were not your select board or your town, have asked, the select board asked us to now go ahead and compile answers to those questions. So with the help of the chief and deputy chief, we've worked out a follow-up plan, which I will describe now and would like certain feedback from the rest of the board in terms of just the questions. We have about 100, a little more than 100 questions, and what we've done is divide them into subject groups and would like to post answers in a series of installments. It's a big list. So what I talked about with the chief and deputy chief is that we would go ahead and address them in groups and releases. Some of the questions we've got answers for already. Some are relatively simple to get, and some may take a little bit of work. So what I would expect is that you'll see, if the select board's comfortable with this approach, we'll be posting a series of releases, maybe the first as soon as later this week, early next week, and then it will probably take 2 or 3 weeks for us to work through and get a pretty complete list. But I think it was a great start and a good opportunity for dialogue and communication. And Anita, you kicked it off. Any comments that you have to share as well?
Well, I was just thinking that maybe if people were wondering like the number of questions, so Tom was talking about in the end, we have around 100, but we've talked about how more than 100 have been submitted. And it's really probably because there's overlap in questions. A lot of people had similar questions, so we've grouped them. And so that's why it's a smaller number.
Tom, I do have a question, and I know that it's already come in on the questions, which is where are the answers going to be posted?
We should discuss that together. I was thinking we would probably post it on the police webpage that many of the policies and other public questions have already been asked and responded to by the Westford Police. But we could also post it in other places too, if that's helpful.
Mark?
Yeah, so I assume that these questions are not just about or to the police department. I think, in that night, there were many to the school system as well. So it may be best for several reasons, including not only that, but that it not be on a town website. Maybe it's appropriate to be coming from one of the committee's websites, as they were the sponsors of the evening themselves. So just something to think about.
I think that
could we post in both places or in multiple places, and that gives people, an opportunity to go to any number of websites to find the answers. Tom?
So I think if this board is comfortable with us doing it that way, I think the organizing group, which is Westford Justice, is that correct? .org. I think we'll post them there, and if people are comfortable with it, then I think posting in both places is a great idea.
Both places being what? Sorry.
Well, I was thinking it'd be the westfordjustice.org site and also the landing page for where the Westford Police are already posting a bunch of those answers. But if there's a better place, we can certainly, or a more appropriate centralized place, we can certainly post it there instead.
Anita?
I would just say that I would worry about version control. So if we have multiple if we have a document and we're updating it every few weeks, but then we have it posted in a few different places, then there might just be upkeep issues. So if we have it kind of focused on one website, but then it can be linked in multiple places, then maybe that's something we could try too.
Okay.
And I think that was what the organizers had contemplated, was doing a link, just for the reason you mentioned, Nita.
Scott, did you?
I would actually ask whether it might be appropriate to create a new landing page someplace on the town website for, I don't know what you're going to call it, but we all agree this is the first discussion of many. And as Mark mentioned, there were questions about the schools. I think there'll be questions about other town functions as we move forward. And rather than having it all, pigeonholed as if it was a police, documentary. I think it's a town question. We should be on a town dedicated site for whatever it might be called, diversity or, but it should, I think, be its own landing.
Okay, I mean, I think, I suspect as we sort of move forward and as we get to the second part of this discussion, I agree, Scott, this is going to be broader, and there may be, there are probably going to be things that that other information materials that we're going to want to be posting for the community and for the town. So maybe it does make sense to think about creating a separate dedicated site on the town's webpage for that, and for starting with this information and then moving forward with any other information that we may be developing over the course of the the months. And I think including, as you guys have said, not just the police, but schools, other facets of the community that are being impacted, because I think as we've all talked about, this is a community-wide initiative and is not just aimed at the police or the schools or one particular department or section of our community. It really is a community-wide initiative. So it might make sense that we have it as a dedicated website. So Jody and Eric, is that something that we can start to look into and do?
Yes, but you need to tell me what you want to call it.
Okay, got it.
And we can set it up tomorrow, but I need to know, what you want it called, so.
Mm-hmm. Mark?
Yeah, so I think the one thing we need to be very careful about is this event, and I assume many others, are not town government sponsored. Some of the responses may not be directed towards town government. So if whatever we call this landing page, it needs to be made very clear that this is for the benefit of the community. It's not Jody's responsibility to manage this landing page, and if it is, then there's going to have to be a review of answers to questions before it goes up. So you've kind of got this public-private thing going on a public website, and I just think it's something we need to be a little bit cautious about.
I think we do have to be cautious, but I also think that there are some things that are going to be that may be sponsored by the community. I mean, my understanding, or I've heard, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but that the school committee is planning on a forum, later on in the summer, and it may be that there are things that they want to get out to the community. I'm just thinking that I want to make it as easy for the community as possible. I want there to be sort of one place for the community, that the members of the community can go to gather information, so that they, are not going to, 3 or 4 different websites to get all of the information. And I'm open to ideas to how to do that in the best way possible, hearing your concerns as well, Mark. So I'm, from just a planning and a process point of view, trying to figure out what works best. Scott, I think you had your.
Well, just while, Mark is correct that this was a third-party sponsored event. However, the answers are coming from a town department, and I suspect that that'll be true for future events that are being held in terms of looking at town practices. So I think we would not be posting, internal discussions on the part of that non-town group, but I think anything that is posted would have, the town's input into it, because it would be responses to questions or else a broadcast of some meeting coming up. So I think we'd be fairly, I think clean with that.
Okay. So if we were to do that and to create a website, we need to come up with a name for it, okay? Or we need to have some designation of what we want to call this website. So I'm open for ideas.
I think some ideas might emerge out of the next part of the conversation, because
Yep.
if we depending on what this group decides, if there is a go forward action, that may have a name, and that may suggest to us what a good sort of web page name might be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One suggestion. I'm looking at some questions and comments that have came in. One is simply to call it a community bulletin board. I think we have something like that. Don't we have in the town's website, Jody and Eric, isn't there on the menu something that says community board or something like that?
There's public notices. I think that's might be what you're referring to.
I thought
But
there was
that,
something
that
community
you know,
too.
I'm not exactly sure, but we'll do whatever you.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was just something, but that was thrown out there. So anything else that anybody wants to say about the forum before we move on to the second part of this agenda item? Okay, seeing nothing, I think, and Mark, particularly, you've said this in the past, it's one thing to talk about doing something and to make statements, but it's another thing to actually start to take some actions and to start planning to take some actions. So we've certainly done a lot of talking in the last month, and we issued a statement. So I do think that it's time to start to talk about what actions we as a board can start to take within our community, or to start to explore within the community as we move forward. So open to, I know we've gotten a couple of ideas from the community, and I know that some of you have some ideas as well. So I'm certainly, open to hearing from you as we try to start to put together some items that we might start to look at and plan for. So, Tom.
So reflecting on what we heard, I heard two things. And actually, first, before I do that, I want to express gratitude to the chief and deputy chief for participating and just all the great work that the Westford police do to keep us safe. So two things I heard. One was that there's a big opportunity for us to really seek out and listen to the needs of communities of color in town, and learn how we can make our town functions more diverse, inclusive, and fair. And the other thing that I heard, and also heard from a bunch of other conversations I've had since, is that we might benefit from multiple pathways for community members to express concern or to report incidents of concern. And I think we would need help with communities of color to establish more approachable and accessible pathways to express concerns. And so one approach to that could be to assemble a group, a wide-ranging, diverse group that could have a series of conversations with various town functions. And I echo everything people are saying about this being a whole town opportunity for us. And I think one idea would be to have that group meet with some of the various institutions, identify opportunities for better cooperation and understanding, and where necessary or of interest, suggest different policy areas that we might explore further.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts, no surprise. So, despite all the conversations that we've had thus far, I still struggle a bit with what it is currently for us to do as a board, other than continue to listen so we can gather more information to develop and continue to develop areas of opportunities for us as a town. I'm hard pressed to point to something very specific tonight that would suggest this is what we should be doing, because I haven't heard what it is yet. I will make one recommendation for us to consider and evaluate going forward. And some of you have heard this from me before, and so for that I apologize. But one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, of the way governments run versus the way businesses run revolves around human resources. So when you think about from a community perspective, if they've got an issue, or if a department employee has an issue, where do they go? In a company, they would go to a human resources department to file a complaint, whether that be an internal employee or whether that be a customer of some sort to the business who had an issue with an employee. Generally speaking, local governments don't have that kind of department, that have that kind of professional staff who do that kind of work. So if, from what I've heard from some people in the community, they're not comfortable going to a department head necessarily if they've got an issue. Whether that's an employee or a town person. So, and I know that when you are an employer of a generally union-based employee set, that's a whole different set of dynamics. But I would like us to consider and evaluate what some other towns, either in this state or outside of this state, how they are set up to manage human resource issues in their government entity. And I'm certainly willing to help do some of that investigation. But I think it is a big missing piece to some of this that's going on. As I referenced earlier, seems to be around people having issues with, whether it be, doesn't matter what department it is. So as we're considering all these other things over time, which we should continue to do and evaluate and listen, I do think that would be not only a help to residents, but it may also be a secure place for people to go who are employees.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll go.
Anita?
Yeah, thank you. So I agree actually with both what Tom and Mark have already said. So I think there's a multi-pronged approach that's needed here, one around communication and education and understanding. I think we've really saw sort of a disconnect during the forum of what people are saying. And I think we can make that gap smaller by hearing more from the police and from communities of color and from our other departments that we're going to talk to more. So there's a huge, I feel like people are very eager to move forward and create change and change policies, but I'm not clear on what exactly we're trying to change or what change needs to happen. And I personally need to have more of that understanding. And I think for us to set policy or something, I don't feel like we have the right data for that yet. But I know that I feel like there is a hunger to do something quickly, and trying to figure out what that is. I'm still sort of, I'm not sure yet. I know people from the community are going to share some ideas with us, I'm sure probably tonight too. But I definitely am in the camp of of needing more conversations and really being collaborative and working in partnership. I have done some research of what other towns have done around the Commonwealth with establishing human rights commissions, which not every town has one, but they basically investigate discrimination or any sort of complaint, but it's not specific to race. So it would include sexual orientation or gender or something. I don't know. It's just the whole thing, right? So I'm like, that's something that we don't have here in Westford that I feel like would be something we could explore, which would be an independent body. But then I also see Mark's point about having a more established, streamlined process where you're not only relying on volunteers, but there's something that's sort of in place with a little bit more accountability too. So that's just kind of where I am at the moment.
Scott?
So, I think we know all that we got here because of a proximal event in Minneapolis involving the police. And so far, this whole discussion has been around the police. But 2 or 3 years ago, we had a vigil on the town common because 2 ethnic Indians were murdered in Indiana because somebody thought they were Iranian. So that's a doubly insensitive religion and race both mixed together. And we didn't take any action. No one in the country took much action. And of course, before that, about 20 years was the dragging to death of Matthew Shepard for being gay. And so I think there's this, I don't want to confuse the most recent event and make that the focus. I think there's a broad discussion to be had about race, religion, sexual preference, and perhaps other disabilities. It's some of the, if you're autistic, you can be also mocked in society. So I think there's a number of sensitivity issues we need to address, and I don't know what they all are. So I think with Tom, we have to have some form of investigation. In fact, our only recent documented problem in town occurred in a polling place. It wasn't even where you would think to find it. So I think our evaluation is to be across the town and across the spectrum of minorities who collectively may be the majority.
Mark?
Yeah, and so I agree with exactly what Scott said. The other thing that I think we need to do, like there's only so much the 5 of us, and there's only so much that the town government can do other than to act in appropriate ways. And some of these things we're starting to talk about. But there's 23,000 residents in town who we need to continue to encourage to treat with each other as residents with the kind of respect and compassion that you would expect from anybody, because the town employs 600 people, 700 people, 800 people, something like that. And there's 23,000 or more here in town. So individuals have to take responsibility and accountability for their actions and be responsible. And so, hopefully we can be a part of setting an example about how we treat each other and how our departments treat other residents in town. And I think we do a very good job of that. Of course, there's areas of opportunity. There is in every organization you would ever be a part of. But the non-800, 23,000 residents who live and work and play in this town all the time need to treat each other in the ways that we're expecting ourselves to treat. And I don't really know what to do about that other than to continue to talk about it and set the examples for others. But, if somebody behaves poorly who doesn't live in town to another person, or they live in town and they treat another person in town poorly, that's an overall societal issue. And we can only help the people that we surround ourselves with. And so we just need to continue to do that and treat each other with the kind of respect and compassion that, that everybody seems to want to do, but not everybody's doing.
Tom,
I just sort of drawing on the community, like Mark was talking about. I think we have an opportunity now because I think there's a lot of energy for people who would be willing to put time and energy into a diverse sort of a working group. We may not be ready to decide if we need something like a human rights commission, like I've seen in other towns. And Anita sent me a link earlier, and it was interesting to see what their roles and responsibilities are. There's good documentation of that we can study. But I think for now, if we could move towards getting a diverse group that could really help us understand where some of the gaps are in needs, understanding, I think that there's an opportunity to do that right now, and there's a lot of energy in the community to do that right now. So I don't know if that would be a working group of some number that could meet with some of the town departments and help us think about this and think about what we need. I don't feel like I'm ready to decide what we need or what additional reporting techniques, as Mark pointed out, would be most accessible and approachable for all the different communities that could be subject to discrimination. So I don't know, is a concrete thing. I think some form of working group that could help us gain their perspective and talk to the different town entities, I think, and bring back their findings to us. I think that'd be very helpful. I'd learn a lot from that.
yeah, no, Tom, I don't think we're coming up with solutions tonight, and I certainly didn't mean to imply that, we were going to walk out of this meeting saying we were going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I certainly agree with all of you that we do not have enough information at this point in time to determine what 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 should be. We also don't, I think we need further information and input from the community to determine what they're looking for and what they see is needed, and what would be helpful. So I think putting together a working group to start that process makes sense to me, for us to then further understand what we may or may not be doing, whether it's a Human Rights Commission, or I know Acton has just established a committee. I read it. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I know that they have diversity inclusion or something like that. I know that they've just established that. And, is that something that, we think we might want to do, that we're interested in? But I don't think we're at a place where we can make those decisions yet until we have, until we hear what, until we have a working group, until we hear what the community is looking for as well. And what's going to what's going to make the community and certainly constituents of our community feel like that they're being heard and they're being recognized, and that they have a role to play in this as well. Because if we don't get community buy-in and if we don't get community input, then it really doesn't matter what we do, because it's not going to work and it's going to fail. So, Mark?
Yeah, so maybe an
Scott,
opportunity for us. An opportunity is at our next meeting to hear from, I know we've heard from a couple or 3 people who are interested in doing something, that Tom is suggesting, forming a committee. Mary Claire O'Neill, for example, somebody who, has come forward and had some ideas about what we could do and is willing to step up. And I'm sure there are maybe a couple of other. So maybe there's an opportunity to have a few of those people come speak to us about what they're thinking, to help us deliberate on some of that.
Mm-hmm. Scott, and then Anita, because I think
I agree with Mark. I would hope we would have some people of color as well on that committee, or that group that we talked to. But I even think of a candidate or two myself that I've talked to. I just want to sort of think about the causes of this problem. Some of it is flat out hatred. Some of it is ignorance. Some of it is change. When I moved to town, I remember the person leaving the house said, "The town's changed too much. I don't want to be here anymore." That was like 87. It's changed a lot since then. So I think some of this town behavior is just they don't like change, and well, sorry, you have to deal with it. But yeah, I go back to past couple of years with the Indian community has had Holi, their festival of colors on the town common, and they invite the whole town to go to that. And is there something we can be doing with our newest selectmen from the Cultural Commission, to make the community more involved in some of our major ethnic groups, to really become more one town and not a set of distinct culture groups. But maybe that's sort of part of what happens when we form this thought group, whatever it might be called.
Anita, did you?
Yep. I just want to say that I think it makes sense to have a work group, especially if it's filled with people of color, because these are the voices that we're missing right now that we don't have here right now. But I also want to make sure that, as I feel like as people all know, but I'm just going to say this anyways, leadership, starts from the top, and the tone is set from leadership and from the top. So I want to make sure that even if we do set a work group, that it's really fully supported by leadership, and we're really working hand in hand, and that it doesn't get lost into just a work group kind of on the side, that this really is a community-wide effort and a community-wide event. And so that we're really going to be supporting that, full on.
Yep.
No, absolutely. It does have to be supported by leadership. If it's going to succeed. Let me just take a moment. I have a whole bunch of comments here. More comments, I think, than questions from folks. And just bear with me for a minute. One of the questions for us to consider, and I'm not sure for people who are submitting the questions that we can answer your questions tonight as much as just recognize them and acknowledge them for further consideration. So even if we don't answer them tonight, please know that they're not getting lost. They can be saved, and we can get back to them. But with that, one of the questions is, would students be part of this group? Westford Public Schools is a part of this town. So, I think we may want to consider in formulating this group to speaking with the schools, and to consider whether we do want, whether, we want to hear from students and have their perspective as well.
Of course.
Let's see.
There's a comment that just clarifies that Acton Select Board has created the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, which is just what you were talking about, Andrea.
I couldn't remember the name of it. I read about it in I can't remember which newspaper, but I did read about it. There are, in terms of when we were speaking about any action items, and again, just suggestions from the community. One action would be focused on hiring and recruitment processes to ensure that the town employees are diverse. Do we actively recruit people of color today? Are there hiring goals? There are a couple of comments about looking at allocation of resources, both within the town and within the police department. Let's see what else is here.
Just to note that the diversity and hiring question was posed both to Westford Police and to the town as part of the question list. So those will be some of the things we'll be working through. And it looks like Chief McEnany has a question.
I don't know if he has a question or he's going to answer something. Either one. Chief, I think you need to unmute yourself. Nope. Eric, is he unmuted?
Eric's not unmuted.
Everyone's trapped.
Okay.
Looks like he's self-muted.
Try again, Tom.
Looks like he can hear us. Maybe Eric, you want to call Tom on his cell phone and just we can relay his question that way?
Sure.
Probably other questions and comments relate to reporting. To your point, Mark, could we establish a mechanism if people have a concern to report not to the head of that department, but to some other path?
Right.
So good point.
Um,
And there are a couple hands up. I don't know if we're going to have time for that, Andrea, but just so you've seen them.
okay, I'm just finishing looking through. I think those are sort of the main points of the questions, Tom. So
I think you're right. How do we get more people involved? How do we promote diversity? And then a couple directions for consideration of things like diversity, equity, inclusion committee, or some of the other ideas that needed brought up.
bias training is also one that's being brought up.
There's a point here that both an internal sort of town-appointed body that would be inclusive and diverse, and then also potentially the opportunity for a group of other citizens who would be participating and offering suggestions, offering some sort of external accountability is one of the ideas here too.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
Tom has raised his hand now. Let's see if
Tom,
we got him.
are you with us, Tom?
I think I got it
Oh,
back.
we got
Didn't let me
okay.
do it with the headset on, so I had a.
We can hear you now.
So I just wanted to address that question about the diversity in hiring. We did address that in the forum question. 48 officers. I have 2 officers of color. Over the last 6 years, I had 3 officers of color. I think I have one of the highest percentages of officers of color in the town. And the other point that I did want to make is the diversity that has been part of our plan when we go through hiring, but we really have to fall within the guidelines of the civil service when we do that. One suggestion that I would make about your committee is I do have some staff members of color that I would suggest, and I would welcome the opportunity. One is a resident and one is not a resident, but open it up to them so you get a police officer's perspective from color as well. So I would offer that up as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so. Okay, so before we leave this subject, let's talk about sort of where we go from here, what we want to do for our next meeting, and how we go about if we're going to establish this working group, how are we going to go about establishing it? Who's going to be, who are going to be members of it? What is its quote mission going to be? And I want to have some next steps that we're going to be taking to present at our next meeting so we can keep this moving forward. Tom.
To Mark's idea, one option would be we could come forward with a couple of models that we've seen other towns adopt or have heard in terms of suggestions. We could encourage anybody who's interested to make a suggestion. And probably the best way to do that would be to email the select board. If you go to the town website, you can find our email addresses. Maybe we could present a couple options in the next meeting, and maybe if there are people in the community that would like to participate, maybe if they could also send us a note, maybe through the citizens action form. I think if we knew sort of who might be interested in being involved and had a couple models to choose from, might be possible then in the next meeting to choose a direction.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes. I mean, I think that makes sense. If there are models out there that we can, sort of, pick and choose from the best, so to speak, and what best fits Westford. I think that's very helpful, and we don't have to, reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And we can look at those different models and then sort of take our own and formulate our, a committee, a group, a model that works for Westford. So I think it would be helpful if we could gather some of that information. I mean, I think we could we could reach out to Acton and get some information about the committee that they've just established. I know, Anita, you said you did some research, and you could share that with us. We can, I'll reach out to Mary Claire and find out what they're doing in Chelmsford and the committee that she proposed, and maybe bring all of that back to our next meeting. And if anybody in the community has ideas or has experience in such groups, then please reach out to the board and let us know so we can incorporate your ideas as well.
Andrew, I think
Newest
Anita had
member
a question.
is very
sorry?
patient.
Anita had a question.
Member is being far more patient than any of us would be.
Because it's
She'll
my
learn.
first meeting, it's still nice. We talked a lot about wanting to hear more from communities of color, more from the community itself. And I was just wondering if that's something, a charge that we would give then to this work group, or if that's something that we still want to start and maybe host ourselves. I'm not sure. I just wanted to get clarity on that because I feel like that is a big information piece that we want.
I think we do. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I guess I was thinking both. I'm thinking that sort of the working group of a diverse group of members, many of color, but also disabilities, also LGBTQ. I think if they can talk to different departments and help surface some ideas, we could hear things in their voice. But I would want to participate in those meetings too, if I could, and hope that they could come back and present to us what they've heard. There's a comment here that says being diverse, inclusive, and with an approach to equity shouldn't fall exclusively on the shoulders of people of color. Absolutely. I think we all need to do that, but I think hearing your voices would be particularly helpful because I think we need more of your perspective. So I hope it didn't come across like we're, at least my comments was trying to throw responsibility on anybody else. It's just, I think we really need help to get that full perspective.
I agree. We definitely need help. Scott, and then there are a couple of other comments and questions that I just want to state, but go ahead, Scott.
So that's a sort of a call out to anyone listening who's either clergy or therapist, because I think how you ask the question determines what you get for a response, and none of us, I don't think, are qualified to elicit feedback as well as professionals. And historically, clergy have been very involved on the forefront of human rights, and I think in this town that's true as well. So I think it would be great just to get their comments on. Something back to my time on Housing Authority, we had issues with residents who didn't speak English as their first language, or frankly that well. And we reached out to the Chinese church in Chelmsford. Their pastor came to every meeting of our residents to translate for them. He translated notices for them. And so I think we sometimes ignore right in our own backyard people who have a lot of experience with those who we want to try to help.
I think you're right. So, okay, Tom.
I wanted to mention that there's at least one hand still up out there, which is Beth Perkins. I just want to make sure you'd seen that.
Oh, okay. I don't know if Beth's hand is still up, but
It looks like it's still up to me, but it's maybe.
Okay. Beth, are you still? If you are, assuming you're out there, Beth, do you still have a? Oops, she just took it down.
Oh, okay. Okay, sounds like we got it.
Up again.
Okay.
Beth, do you have a question that you would like to ask?
Eric, we may need you to unmute her. Maybe I can do it.
She's actually self-muted.
She's self-muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Beth.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that Action for Social Justice at First Parish Church and Indivisible Westford participated in the forum, and we plan on following up on on the issues that came out of the forum. We I think at this time in this program, I think it's really important to have some communication vehicle. So we will commit, we created a website called westfordjustice.org. So until we figure out where is the final repository for all this information, if people want to find the answers to the questions after we get them from the police department and information about future events, and I know we're planning on a follow-up organized by Indivisible and First Parish Church in like the 2-week time frame, that we'll have that information on westfordjustice.org. So I wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, and appreciate it. And I think for now, we'll certainly take you up on your offer that can be the repository for where the answers to the questions are and information will lie until we figure out what the town will be doing and moving forward. So thank you very much. Okay, so finally, there were a couple of comments. One was an individual has raised a question about restorative justice and how that works into police operations, and whether the Westford Police Department should be working or incorporating restorative justice. Certainly something that we can look at. There was a question. Why are we only including the clergy in this conversation? It seems that it was taken as meeting only Christians and not involving leaders of other religions. If that's the way it was taken, that wasn't the way it was meant. We would be reaching out to and including leaders of all religions here in the community.
In fact, I explicitly said clergy because clergy covers all religions. Imams are clergy, right? So rabbis are clergy. I did not say pastor, I said clergy.
And then there is a comment that there are many people of color in this chat who are making ideas and suggestions that are being glossed over. How are you going to listen to the people of color in the community if their suggestions aren't being considered? We in no means are intending to gloss over the suggestions that we are receiving. We have them all. Tom and I have attempted to sort of summarize those concerns and suggestions right now, but they're all being gathered and they all will be considered. It's just that, you know, given our meeting and our schedule and other business, we can't address each and every single one of them tonight, but that in no means, I don't want to imply that they are not going to be considered and that they're going to be ignored. As I said, we are capturing all of these comments so that we can go back to give to them and to give them full consideration.
And I'll mention that many of the names that we see, thank you for joining. Many of these are folks that have reached out in other ways and had conversations with many of us over the past couple of weeks. So absolutely want to dig in deeper with all those comments and make sure we include all that input in our next steps.
Okay, so I think we have a plan for our next steps. Jody, I'm sorry.
So I think Tom suggested that people fill out a citizen activity form. So I need to have a name to establish that form. So do you want me to at least temporarily use the Acton name while you figure out what you want to call it? Or what would you like me to put in for a name for people to express interest?
Tom?
I think diversity, equity, and inclusion working group might be a good term because it's a widely used term, and I think describes what we're at.
I would agree with that. And I did not, I'm sorry, I passed over one question in light of your comment, Jody. It's a very important question, which is where can I find the citizens activity form? And you can find it on the town's website. So
That's correct.
Tom?
And also in the interest of getting information out, a proposal, and I'll certainly understand if the committee would rather consider it more, but we could give the landing page we've been talking about on the town website the same working title, sort of the diversity, equity, inclusion. And just to, as we, over the next couple of weeks, begin to post some of these answers, we could post them on a landing page with that name.
Mark?
Yeah, I just think we need to have a conversation with the schools and some others, because, you know, people are there's going to be, you know, social media is already well, everywhere, of course. And so if we're going to have a place, I just have this concern about this public-private thing. And so if you want to have a conversation with the schools and see if they're comfortable going, you know, putting, because this isn't about the police department, right? This is about everything. And so we need to be comfortable that everybody's okay with the town providing that forum. And if the schools aren't okay having on a town website, they're going to have it on their school website. I don't want to have just.
We're getting some kind of interesting side noise.
Yeah. Can people make sure they're on mute, please?
Somebody just finished dinner. So yeah, I just want to make sure that everything's there. So if we can maybe hold off on that until somebody has a conversation, at least with the schools, to make sure they're comfortable, whatever's going to get put, it's going to be everything. It's not going to just be, you know, these three departments.
So why don't we take Westford Justice up on its offer for the next couple of weeks and use that as the posting site, and we can have a discussion. We can follow up with the schools and have a discussion with them, and bring this back at our July 28th meeting for further discussion.
It looks like Eric is showing us where the citizen activity form is.
Yes.
Correct. So if you go to the community tab, it's right underneath that under volunteering. You'll see the citizens activity form link.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay, so are folks good with that for now? Just is the board good with that? Just using Westford Justice for now, and then we can talk about town website at our next meeting. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you for everybody who has participated and who has offered suggestions and written into us during this discussion. We very much appreciate it. And as I said, we will gather these for further consideration as we are moving forward. So thank you all. All right, with that, we are at our 7:35 p.m. item, which is a request from the Rodenbush Community Center that due to the disruption in programming because of COVID-19, a request to waive July 1st, 2020 lease payment and or future lease payments is required in their 5-year lease. So is somebody from Rodenbush?
Michelle's online.
Okay, can we unmute Michelle? There she is. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
So Michelle, do you want to just, you need to unmute yourself? Okay. Eric, can you call her and tell her how to unmute herself?
Yeah, Michelle, we can't hear you yet.
Michelle, there should be a red button on your toolbar with a microphone picture. If you click it once, it'll turn green.
Okay, there it goes. Sorry, folks.
Okay. So briefly, Michelle, just want to tell us what you're looking for and why you're looking for it.
Yeah, so we did send a letter. It's basically, we are asking for a waiver of a quarter of our rent for the year due to our mandated closure by the state of all of our programs. We are back up and running now, but we've been trying to cut as many costs as we can, seeing as we did not have any revenue during the time that we were closed. So we've been really working on cutting our expenses. We furloughed our employees. We're slowly bringing them back and getting back up and running. But we really could use any help we can get here as far as cutting expenses.
Okay, so Michelle, right now, are you looking for a waiver of all rent for the rest of the year, or?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. We were thinking at least the quarter that we were mandated to be closed. We have not missed a payment either. So we're currently current with our rent. So it would be a future payment that we wouldn't make if it.
Well, I think, excuse me, I think your request, Michelle, was the check that you did submit to me to not accept that too, correct?
No, I don't think so. We enclosed the rent calculation. There was an error on it.
Okay, I thought that there was a request to not cash that check too. So
No, not
anyway,
at all.
okay, good. Well, I'll deposit it then. Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
Mark, I know you have some comments.
Yes. So, hi, Michelle. So what is it specifically? Are you looking for a quarter of each month's rent to be waived, or a quarter's worth of rent to be
A
waived?
quarter's worth of rent.
Okay. So
Eric, if you think that we can see that.
you're
We
insane.
all need magnifying glasses to see that, Eric.
It's zooming.
We're not as young as you, Eric. So that doesn't work, buddy. So here's it. So first of all, I completely understand why you're asking.
Right.
The letter itself was a bit open-ended as far as the length of term. So the letter referenced, some period of time, or maybe through the first quarter. So personally, I would rather see us work together and understand your current financial condition and what your latest projections are through the first quarter, and to have jointly come back with a recommendation, as opposed to, saying a quarter's worth, or saying, let's do this until, some period of time, because of course no one knows what's going on. So we want you to be financially secure and healthy. But I think we also need to have some surety on the town side, because there's the offset to you not paying, which is other stuff on the town side. So I'm happy to help do that, and to sit with either you or somebody else to, just go through what's your current financial condition, what are the latest projections like within a range of scenarios between now and the end of the first quarter, if you come back partially, wholly, somewhere in between, and then maybe come back with a recommendation to the greater board on something that's amenable. And we certainly could do that before the next meeting. I can make time to do that.
Okay.
Works for me. Tom?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that's a great idea. Many organizations have had to ask for rent deferral or rent avoidance, and usually they have to go through a financial discussion about where they are as they're with organizations. And so I think that's a great practice.
Yeah, certainly. We're under a great, increase in our regulations of capacity at this point. And certainly we're hoping it will be over in a couple of months, but who really does know when that will change?
Yeah, and I know hopefully you've applied for some funding from the government, and I think as part of our financial discussion, that would be important too to understand that. So if everybody's okay with it, I'll do that with Michelle. Michelle, maybe you can send me some times over the next week and a half or so that you and whoever else you want to involve with it, we can sit on a phone call and we can share some information.
Sure, I will pass this by the board. I have a meeting tomorrow night.
Okay. Scott?
That's why, I mean, Mark kind of raised my point, which was just to, help them out. If they didn't apply for a PPP loan, which would help out with rent, for example, can we give them some assistance with that if it's still a viable option?
Right. We did not apply where we had to furlough our employees and there was no work for them to be done. We felt it would not be forgiven, the loan, and we didn't want to take on any more debt.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
So if we leave it that, Mark, you and Michelle will get together and go over the finances and then report back to us at our next meeting. Then we can, at that time, determine, what we can do and how we can help out Road and Bush so that it can continue to be financially viable. Jody?
I'd just like to suggest maybe that Dan and Eric sit with you all when you meet because they have all the utility information and it might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I will leave it to the four of you to figure out a time for all of you to meet and go through all of this offline, okay?
Very good. And Michelle, yeah, what if the board agrees, your board agrees to doing that, just shoot me some times and dates over the next week and a half or so, and I'll coordinate it with Dan and Eric.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. Our 7:45 p.m. item is to consider a donation from Westford Remembers Memorial Fund of flagpoles to be installed in front of the town hall or the J.B. Fletcher Library. I'm going to exercise the chair's discretion, and I'm going to combine this discussion item with the consent agenda item, which is the request to temporarily hoist the Indian flag for the Indian Independence Day, because I do believe that the two go together, and the decision that we make with respect to the flagpoles is going to impact the requests that we have received for displaying the Indian flag on the town common. So we're going to talk about these two together. Westford Remembers has, and I assume Nancy Cook is out there.
She's right there. We can see her.
Oh, there she is. I should look up. And it looks like, nope, you got to unmute yourself, Nancy. And it looks like David is with her.
We are unmuted.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good
So
evening.
Westford Remembers has offered to donate 2 flagpoles to be erected either in front of the library or in front of Town Hall at this point in time. Since then, we have received, all of us, many comments from the community at large, just raising questions about how this was to be done and what policies would govern what flags could be raised, when they could be raised, how they would be raised, who would be monitoring it, etc. We also have an opinion from town council in terms of appropriate and proper flag etiquette that we all need to, that the town needs to follow when dealing with flag raising and displaying of flags on public property. So if I could summarize, in this, actually, rather than summarize, Jody, Jody or Eric, is Greg Corbo online yet or not?
Yes, he's here. I'm just trying to get him.
Yeah, I was just checking that too.
Yeah, Greg's self-muted, according to this.
How about now?
You sound great, Greg. Thanks.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, everyone.
Greg, rather than me summarize the opinion that you sent to us in terms of both displaying the flag and how it can be displayed, and then second, the policy of that goes along with displaying the flag, I'm going to let you do it.
Great, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So there are two issues that I was asked to address. The first issue is whether and to what extent the town can allow a temporary flagpole to be placed on the common to fly the state flag of India, if that temporary flagpole could not be made to the same height as the permanent flagpole, which currently flies the American flag. And there is a regulation in federal law that requires that during times of peace, the flag of a foreign state must be flown at the same height as the American flag. However, courts that have interpreted that particular provision have found that the requirements of what they call the United States Flag Code are advisory in nature or are recommendations. And the flag code itself contains no enforcement mechanism, no penalty for violations. So, you know, the flag code does, you know, set forth serious, you know, responsibilities when it comes to displaying the American flag and what you can and cannot do with it. However, you know, certain other provisions of that code can be considered advisory in nature and would not necessarily prohibit you from flying a foreign flag at a height that's lower than the American flag in connection with a particular event. So I gave the opinion that if the board were interested in pursuing that as an interim compromise to address the pending request, it's my opinion that the board could allow that request to proceed. So before I move on to address the other issues, are there questions or comments about that?
Any questions from the board or comments? Tom?
Just so I'm crystal clear, so if we had a temporary flagpole there and the poles were different heights, as long as the flags were the same height, that is something that you feel would be permissible?
Yes, that would
Okay.
meet the letter of the code. However, there may be other requirements that talk about the height of the American flag on a pole. And so, for example, there are only certain circumstances in which you're allowed to fly the American flag at half staff. So, you know, that's something that I think you'd probably want to consult with the veterans agent on before you lowered the American flag to a different height.
Scott?
So Greg, as I understand your opinion, you're saying it is okay as a interim measure to leave the American flag flying at its current height and have the Indian flag flying at a lower height, understanding that our intent is to honor India, not diminish India in so doing.
That's correct. You know, I mean, the idea here is to reach a compromise where it may not be feasible in the time that you have to put up a flagpole that is the same height as the existing flagpole. And so, no, the intent would not be in any way to diminish the country of India or its residents, but rather to give them a forum or an opportunity to display their flag where otherwise they wouldn't have the ability to do that.
Exactly. We're looking at a compromise that makes it work, is what we're saying.
Correct.
But we're not going to lower the American flag to half staff. We'll keep it at full height.
Well, that's, that question is really up to you to decide.
Okay. But in your opinion, is that acceptable?
To lower the American flag to half staff?
No, would it be acceptable to have the American flag at full height? Understanding that means the flag of India would be lower.
Yes, legally speaking, it's my opinion that would be allowable. The question is a matter of policy, is whether or not you want to proceed in that regard.
Okay.
So we could do that if we so desire, and if we choose to do so.
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, it just seemed to me that there was complications with lowering the American flag, and there's no complication with leaving it at full height. So the path of least resistance, if the American flag at full height, and then the path to honor India is to have their flag at as high as we can make it, in the spirit of honoring it.
Right. I don't think anybody's talking about lowering the American flag.
Well, Mark, what Tom mentioned, the fact of having the same height, that was all. Just want to clarify.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarification.
Okay. So that is certainly that's certainly one option that we have, because that then leads into the second part of this discussion, which is, whether or not the town should have, wants, requires a policy with respect to flags that can be displayed on a second flagpole in town, and when and how and what flags can be displayed. So, Greg, I know you and I had a discussion about flag policy and whether the town should adopt one or not, and what the pros and cons are. So if you could just explain your opinion to the board and to the residents as well, so we can incorporate that into the discussion.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So when we get to the point of determining whether or not to install a second permanent flagpole, the question that you have to face is, how is that flagpole going to be used and perceived in terms of speech? Because, the flying of a flag is a form of expression protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And so when a public body allows a flag to be flown, there are First Amendment implications. And there are two categories into which flying a flag can fall, according to the courts. The one category is called government speech. And this is a category in which you have a symbol or a message on public property, on town-owned property, that you use to display messages that are supported by and endorsed by the town. And this is referred to as government speech because the message is yours, and that means that you have the ability to control that message, and you get to pick and choose which messages you display and which messages you reject. And while you have the ability to, solicit requests to endorse certain messages, the speech does not become private speech at that point. It's always public speech. And so, if you designate the flagpole as a forum for government speech, what you're saying is any flag that's flown on that pole is displaying a message that is supported by the town of Westford. And so if you display the flag of India, then you are sending a certain message that you support whatever that flag stands for. And likewise, you could choose to raise a flag that espouses unpopular beliefs, but you're saying that they're your beliefs. And so, there's sort of always a compromise here. So on the one hand, if it's government speech, you get to control it. No one has a right to have their message displayed. However, on the other hand, you suffer the consequences of your decisions. And, those decisions may not be popular with everyone. And if that's the case, you can't separate yourself from that message because it's your message. The second category is when you open up an area of public property as a forum for private speech. And it's called a public forum. And in this regard, it would be a designated public forum in which you're saying, we're going to allow this flagpole to be used by private parties to display messages that they support. So in this example, there's a festival going on to honor the country of India, and you will then allow the proponents of that festival to fly their flag. And it's not seen as town speech, it's seen as private speech. And so you're not saying this is a good message or this is a bad message. You're saying we're allowing private parties to use this to display their messages, and it's their message. So if someone decides to display a message that's unpopular, you're not responsible for that. But the compromise, or the other side of the coin, is that you have very limited ability to say no. And so by opening up for some speech, you have very little or no discretion to eliminate other forms of speech based on the message that they're sending. And so if you choose to fly the flag of a country that is considered an ally of the United States, you might be then required to fly the flag of a country that is considered an enemy of the United States. And you would have no ability to pick and choose whose message you can allow and whose message you cannot allow. Now, of course, there are some limits to that, with respect to speech that would be considered hate speech or that would incite violence. But by and large, if it's a designated public forum, you're limited to only reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and you cannot regulate on the basis of content. So, whether you decide we're going to have this as an avenue of government speech or an avenue for private speech as a designated public forum, my recommendation is that there be a written policy that describes the nature of the forum and sets forth the criteria that you're going to use to decide, what's going to be allowed to be displayed there and what's not.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So Nancy and David, what appeared at first blush and started out as a very generous donation by Westford Remembers is actually a whole lot more complicated than all of us thought or anticipated when you first made when you first made known that you would like to make this donation. And so I think for that reason, and for what we've heard from town council tonight, I think we have to, at least as a general proposition, pause for a moment in order to allow the board to consider all of the all of the issues that town council just raised. For us, I think we need to take a look at those, consider those issues, because there are a lot of issues there, and it's really complicated, and it's very complex and far more complicated than, I don't think any of us understood when we first, when you first contacted us. But separate and apart, after we talk about that, separate and apart from that, then I think we do need to also then discuss whether we are comfortable, and also I do want to bring Noreen into this discussion as well, whether we are comfortable with the compromise that is being offered to her and in celebration of National India Day. So with that, comments from the board, Mark?
I think you're on mute, Mark. No, still can't hear you.
No,
Sorry, Mark.
You're still on mute. You're still on mute, Mark. My goodness, I think this is the first time Mark has been muted.
It's one way to keep me speechless.
There we go. There we go. Loud and clear.
Not down for very long. So I was saying, Nancy and Dave, thank you for, as always, stepping up to the plate and wanting to do some great things. With everything that's going on in the world right now, this is just another confounding dilemma that we're quite honestly, in my opinion, are not prepared for.
I think.
When you think about some of the comments that we've received and the implications that something that seems so simple, which is just to celebrate something great, ends up being so complicated and causing problems potentially that none of us are in a position right now to really understand, is painful for me. The other side of the coin is, as you two know probably better than anybody, we take years, years to figure out where a monument should go and what size it should be and what materials it should be. And if all of the parties who are involved in the town common and the public properties, have they all opined? And what are their issues with it? And is it a site issue? Is it and here we are, rushing through a decision that has far greater implications than any of the other ones that you guys have brought to us in the past. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so I can't tonight sit and vote for the receiving of this very kind donation for all of those reasons. And I obviously want to have more conversation about even the temporary one, but we're inviting something that I don't think we're prepared to respond to the extent that we move forward with this. And it's, to me personally, it's a shame, but it is where we are right now as a society. And we better be prepared for what comes next.
Other comments? Scott, and then I think David and Nancy, do you want to respond? I can't tell if you're waving at us or you're raising.
Yes, we do.
I'm sorry. Let me just hear from Scott and then I'll get to you guys. Okay.
I'd rather hear from Nancy and David, actually.
Okay. Then we'll hear from
I'll
Nancy
give
and
the
David.
floor to them.
Thank you, Scott. We're not mute, so here we are. After listening to Greg, I was terrified. I mean, I think other than Jody, who said this was bigger than you're thinking it is, Nancy, we did think that it would just be something nice and make it easy so that Noreen could hang her flag and we'd have a place to hang the state flag or the town of Westford flag. We have offered to purchase the 2 temporary poles. Noreen has found 16-foot poles. So if you do find a spot and do come to agreement tonight to put them on town hall, we have offered to buy those for her as just an offer of kindness to welcome that celebration. But we understand. We wanted to do it. We will do it if the policies and procedures are put into place. As you know, David's got his pen over here drawing all these pretty places where it could go, whether it's when the new center building gets built or the library or some other place. We just saw oh, look, there's where he thought. That's not it, Eric.
Yeah, that's not it, Eric.
We could be something nice and easy and that it would take care of a problem. So we're sorry we created all that and Greg scared us to death. So we'll retreat for now.
But I guess it's a good discussion to have anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to apologize. I think it's a very good discussion for us to have moving forward. So and your offer was out of kindness, as we all know. So I don't think you need to apologize for that. Anita, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I think Scott was going to go first, and then I'll go after Scott.
John, I was going to say that thanks to Nancy and David, in true firefighter fashion, the alarm went off and David responded, and we just kind of say, well, no, never mind. But India Day occurs once a year, so we'll be here again next year. So I don't want to just dismiss the offer. I want to take this chance to think through how do we make it work. And I think one question for Greg, if he's still around, is if it was a government space, and we're pretty safe saying yes to foreign flags that are allies. If we say yes to some non-government entity, do we then get sued for saying no to some other non-government entity someday? So I think that maybe that's not a question for tonight, but as we think through the policies, it's not as simple as saying or government. It's actually, if it's government, what else might we be liable for too? But so I just want to say, thanks to Nancy and David. It was amazing how fast they responded to this need, and I think we want to pursue it so that we can do this. I mean, it'll occur next year, and we've got other groups in town that are also proud of their heritage that may want to do something similar. I mean, in Boston, they fly the flag of Ireland, the flag of Mexico on various national days. That may be an option for us if we had the poll.
Anita? And then...
Yeah. I just also wanted to say thank you to Westford Remembers. And I know not everybody knows what Westford Remembers is, but maybe you could spend a little time describing, just telling about like what it is and everything too. But I wanted to kind of echo what Scott said, because I feel like a lot of the emails that we received were really about fear around a policy that we don't have. And so, but nobody said they didn't want to see the Indian flag fly. It was more of, we don't want the American flag to be replaced or taken down, or we want to see both, but we're just not really sure how. So I would really like to spend time in the future, continue this conversation to make it work, because everyone seems to want to make it work, and it just seems silly that we can't. And we do have examples. After I saw the email from Greg, I did go searching for the Boston flag policy. So we do have one to kind of take a look at, and it's in our meeting packet if other people want to take a look too. But I'm sure there are other ones that we can take a look at if this is something that the board agrees with exploring further.
And Tom?
So I just wanted to, I also would love Nancy to have a chance just to explain about the great work Westford Remembers does. But I guess maybe a quick question for Greg. So we're exploring supporting the compromise option, which would be 2 temporary flagpoles. Is there anything we'd be wise to consider in terms of exploring a policy, even just around that, to make sure that we don't fall into some kind of problem, or is it such a separate issue that it's not important that we have some policy to help guide if anyone in the future would want to do the same thing?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So the same speech considerations apply to events being held on the common. And I approach this with the assumption that since you allow numerous events to be held on the common, that you already have a policy in place that regulates events on the common. And in fact, I've probably seen that policy as other questions have come up in the past. And so, you know, I guess the issue would be for you is that, you know, it's sort of, you know, if you allow private groups to have their events on the common in accordance with your neutral time, place, and manner regulation, and you're allowing this group to fly a flag, then you would likely have to allow other groups to fly flags as well.
Okay, with the prescriptions around hate speech and other things that you brought up earlier.
That's correct. And some of those things are probably already in your use of town common policy.
Anita?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a clarifying question. So, but we could still allow people to use the town common sort of as we have been, but then in terms of the flagpole itself, they can't use that, right? We could do that.
The temporary flagpole or the permanent one?
Either, or the temporary one. I'm going to assume that the US flag stays on the permanent one.
Right. And so, you know, my recommendation would be that if you allow this group to come in and put up a temporary flag in association with their event, you know, obviously I'd want to look at this on a case-by-case basis, but, you know, shooting off the hip here, I would say that if you allow one group to put up a flag, you should allow the other groups to put up their flags as well. But again, only in association with a permitted event that's being held on the common.
Mark?
Can you hear me? If not, I'll take these off.
We can hear you.
Good.
Okay. So I struggle with the fact that we decided not to have, I think, to do permanent flagpoles because we don't have a policy. And yet we're having a discussion about having temporary flagpoles with a flag, and we don't have that same policy. So to the points that Greg made, to me, they're the same. You bring up the same set of issues, whether it's a permanent pole or a temporary pole. Again, I would do this in a minute if, as a society right now, we weren't just so crazed about everything. But I don't know how a temporary flag going is any different than a permanent flag going when it comes to what it may or may not represent from how we each feel, or what the government does. So
through you, Madam Chair. So the difference is that you have a policy whereby you allow groups to have events on the common, I believe. And so that policy for events on the common is already there. And, you know, my advice to you would be that if a group supporting a state that is an ally to the United States wants to have a rally, you would have to say yes. And if a group wanted to have a rally in support of a country that is an enemy to the United States, you would also have to say yes. So the difference is that you already have an established mechanism for groups to have events on the common. And the temporary flag is just part and parcel of that. It's a prop, if you will, that goes along with the event that you've issued a permit for, as opposed to now putting up a new permanent flagpole in front of a public building. You're essentially starting from scratch, and you have to decide what the ground rules are going to be, because if you have no ground rules, it could be that you have to allow everything. And you know, Mark, I do understand your frustration, but you know, the reality is that, you know, someone mentioned earlier that I was scaring them. Part of me is trying to, because, you know, the reality is that anyone can bring a lawsuit in federal court alleging that you have violated their First Amendment rights even if they're not residents of Westford, even if they've never even been to Westford. And if you don't prevail on that lawsuit, you know, you might be stuck paying their attorney's fees. So they have incentive to bring these lawsuits. And so, you know, I'm certainly not trying to dissuade you from taking action, but I'm just suggesting that if you go down that road, you do so in a deliberate way so that you are sufficiently protected against any challenge that might come later.
Okay, Scott and then Anita. And then I'm going to see if there are any questions and also bring Noreen into this discussion.
So I guess, well, one question on clarification. So I think we'd have now two 16-foot poles. We would have US flag, same height as India. So that solves that problem, right? This is on your head? Okay, good. I guess the second question to Greg is, though, you know, even if we said, you know, no in this case to the, you know, Indian flag on the common, which I'm in favor of, by the way, but if we said no, nothing prevents somebody from coming forward and saying, I want to fly, you know, some unpopular flag. They can still sue us, right? It's a town common, book space. So we guess what we do with India, we still have the same problem, wouldn't we, with some other group?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, as you well know, you could be sued for anything. But you know, the issue is not discriminating on the basis of viewpoint. So if you say no to the flag of India and then no to the next group that comes along, you have a consistent policy basically of saying no flags in connection with events on the common. Likewise, the other way around is that you say yes to India, then you also say yes to the next group that gets a permit to use the common. And so it's essentially, it's either no to everyone or yes to everyone. There is very little room in the middle.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Anita.
Yeah, and I do know how we were doing on time and stuff too, so I'm aware of that, but I'm sorry to keep asking questions. But in your email, Greg, you had given an example about Boston and about a potential, like a lawsuit around the violation of First Amendment rights for not granting permission to fly a certain flag. And Eric, I don't know if you can dig that email up, but do you remember that part of the email, Greg? Would you mind kind of summarizing that for me? Because I thought that we were in that particular lawsuit, the city of Boston did win, and that it wasn't a violation of the First Amendment rights by
Because it had a policy.
A particular flag.
Anita, because
yes,
it
had a policy.
So the Boston lawsuit, Boston did prevail, and what the court held in that particular case was that based on Boston's policy and its history of usage of the flagpole, that the use of the flagpole in that instance was considered government speech. And so whatever flag happened to be flown on that flagpole was a choice made by the city in order to convey a message that the city supported. And that's certainly an option for you if you decide to put up another flagpole. The issue then becomes that, you know, once it's your speech, you're tied to the message. And it may be that not everyone supports that message. And so now you're making a decision that you are essentially speaking on behalf of the community by flying a certain flag. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but you know, I think that's a decision that you need to make as a matter of policy and weigh the pros and cons of that. And you know, it may be that a particular message looks innocuous on its face, but then has some, you know, subtext that others find offensive. And you know, we could probably put out some common examples of that, which I won't now. But you know, you could see how there's, you know, something may look on its face, yeah, we want to support this, we think everyone in town should support this, but then there are other people in town that say, no, I don't support that. Why are you putting that flag up
Okay. Noreen, I believe Noreen is in attendance.
Yes, I am.
Good evening, Noreen.
Good evening. So my good evening to all on the Board of Selectmen tonight and to all attending the meeting today. This is Noreen Buksamusa, representing India Association of Greater Boston. With me also present today is our president, Sanjay Gowda. And all I wanted to say is our purpose in bringing this to you first as the first town was not to come to this stage in our journey to be questioning really what are we doing. Just to let you know, we have confirmation from the town of Dracut, the town of Lawrence, the town of Lynn, the town of Medford, town of Worcester, town of Lowell, town of Wilmington, and the town of Revere. And we have a request to many other towns, including Boston. For the last 30 plus years, we have been actually using the Boston hat shell as well as the government center space to hold our event in big numbers, where we've had the permission to have both the flags up on a pole on our event. So we've never had an issue there either. So my request to this group today is, are we really overthinking this to a point where we are going into spaces where we will take years and years to solve or come to any decision? And it is a simple request from us that we, first as Americans, today I stand in front of you first as an American and then as an Indian. So my interest is first to hoist my American flag before I hoist the Indian flag, which is why I wanted both together at the same place. And we are really celebrating democracy. We are not celebrating a country, its culture. We are celebrating democracy. We are celebrating freedom. And that's our purpose with what we're doing. Sanjay, would you like to say something? Sanjay Gowda, are you on mute?
Is he
Thank
on
you.
mute?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for unmuting. Thank you. Thank you all for actually having time to discuss this. Truly appreciate it. And I think, Noreen, you have articulated well our what we were trying to do. And I don't think I have anything much to add. And again, truly appreciate all your thoughts and discussions on this. Our intention is not to cause any disruption in the thoughts or how all the issues that all of you raised. It is just to bring the, some of the celebrations to the community. I think the earlier point you all were discussing about how do we bring the communities of different kind and create awareness. To part of that is this, in addition to, celebrating the democracies. And so I'll just stop there because Noreen has articulated really very well. And one thing I would like to say is that thank you, Nancy, for offering and really appreciate that. Was such a wonderful gesture. We will go by what you decide. As Noreen's pointed out, we have received around close to 10 towns, similar to some are, cities, but quite a few are towns also, and many are actually going through the similar process. And we're hoping that we will receive, we will have more input soon. We have received a overwhelmingly positive response from a lot of towns. But it's just to again, bring the little bit of awareness of different communities to the forefront, so that there is, this awareness takes us, make us all come together and a little bit aware of what the other countries or other communities are. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate all that you are doing.
Thank you. Tom?
So thank you for being here tonight, and we very much want to be supportive. I think my question is, so are we actively still exploring the temporary or compromise option? Because what I think I heard was Greg tell us that if there's a permitted activity that's not using a town official permanent flagpole, that that at least under our current policy, it would likely be permitted to use these two temporary flagpoles that have been considered. So I guess I want to know, are we exploring that? Do I understand that correctly, Greg? And is that something that would be interesting and acceptable to all parties?
So before Greg answers, yes, Tom, we're still exploring that option. It's not off the table. I don't think the board has made that decision that it's off the table. With that, Greg, do you want to answer the second part of Tom's question?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's my opinion that you may allow an organization that has a permit to use the common for an event to fly a flag in connection with that event on the common.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Just so point of clarification, so I guess Nancy and David, I gather you're also going to donate the temporary flagpoles, is that? And if so, is it a donation to the town or to the Indian Association of Boston?
We actually told Noreen, or I actually told Noreen, that we would purchase them for her.
Okay, great. So we don't have to worry about any gifts or anything else. That's perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. So thank you.
Just tell her where to put them and we will provide them for her.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, this is Noreen.
Chairman?
Yep. Go ahead, Noreen.
I just wanted to first give my heartfelt thanks to both Nancy and David, and of course, Ryan Colbert, who worked with me for almost 2 weeks now to come to a point or come to a decision on which would be the best spot to manage our event. And I have to say this, that we had gone with the Westford Commons for 2 reasons. One, that it was very central. 2, because it's COVID times, we want to make sure that we respect what the COVID requirements are in terms of a crowd gathering. And we know that something like hoisting a flag could probably attract a crowd. So we want to make sure we are in a space that allows it. But when Nancy came forth with her solution, what really I cared about is that we are spending money towards a permanent solution and not towards a temporary solution. So I do thank Nancy for the offer of the temporary solution. I would accept it willingly, but I would like to give it back to the town to use that for anything else that they would like to, because we really don't have the need for those poles moving forward other than for the event. So thank you.
Okay. With that, I think it seems to me that the issue on the table is whether or not to allow 2 temporary poles on the common, one of which will display the American flag and one of which will display the Indian flag in connection with the celebration of Indian Independence Day.
That was going to be my motion, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll second.
All right. Do we have any further discussion about this? Jody.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to, I had pulled up the town common policy there. Eric, if you could pull it back up. I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable with the current policy in light of Greg's comments. So I guess my further question is, if the board was not comfortable with the organization making the request to use the common and the temporary flags, would this cover them, Greg, to disallow that event in flag hoisting?
Well, so the policy does not seem to address flags in particular. So, if you allow this event to have a flag, my opinion would be that you're setting a precedent, and future events would also have to be allowed to have flags. And, you know, I would also say that notwithstanding the broad, you know, language in this policy, it would have to be interpreted that you cannot disallow a group based on the message that they intend to convey in their event, you know, unless that event was going to somehow create a threat to public safety or spreading of hate speech or something like that. So, you know, again, the common thread here is that unless it's government speech, you cannot make decisions based on the content of the message. And so if the common is open for use by private parties, it has to be open for use by all private parties. And you know, to the extent that you're letting one of those parties fly a flag, unless there's a compelling reason to decide otherwise, you would have to let other groups fly their flags as well.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second on the floor to allow 2 temporary poles on the common in connection with the celebration of Indian Independence Day, permitting the United States flag on one of the poles and the Indian flag on the other pole. So with that, and since we are remote, we have to, you know, we do all our votes by by calling out. So Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
No.
Anita?
Can I abstain from this?
You certainly can.
Yeah. Abstain, please.
Okay. Scott?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So it's 3 in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention. So yes, yes, you can go forward. I would work with Nancy and David, as well as the town officials, as to where the temporary poles are going to be placed on the common, and including the director of the rec department, who has care and custody of the common, and I guess the police have already rendered their opinion. So just make sure, you know, you work with the appropriate as to where the location of the temporary poles are going to be.
Absolutely. Thank you
and
so
I
much.
Assume, one last thing, and we didn't talk about this, but I assume at the end of the event that the flags will come down and the poles will be removed at the end of the event. Is that right?
Our original intention had been to leave it for the day, but if that is something that you need us to do, then we will honor that request. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that I think that it needs to come down at the end of the event. Okay.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
All right. And then for further consideration, certainly not tonight, and maybe not even, I doubt at our next meeting, but at some point, I think that we can put on for a future discussion whether or not we want to start to talk about a policy with respect to the displaying of flags.
Okay.
And if so, you know, what that policy is going to look like. But that is a discussion for another time and another night. So thank you all very much appreciated. Thank you, Greg, for your help. I know you're staying on the line for something further in our meeting tonight. So thank you all.
You're welcome.
So we are now at our 7:55 PM item. Yes, I realize I'm now an hour and 10 minutes behind. But we are now at our consent agenda, and we have the following requests. a yoga class, and the applicant is Nancy Dorenfeld, to be held on Wednesday, July 22nd, from 9:45 to 11 a.m. with rain dates of Wednesday, July 29th and Wednesday, August 5th. We've already voted on the Indian Independence Day. A victory rally and promenade for Westford celebrates women's rights to vote, recognizing the ratification of the 19th Amendment. The applicant is Linda Green, the museum director of the Westford Historical Society, Sunday, August 23rd, from 1:30 to 4 p.m. We have 2 banner requests, the state primary election on September 1st. The applicant is Donna Furman, the League of Women Voters of Westford. The dates are Tuesday, August 25th to Friday, September 4th. The location is in front of the First Parish Church. And then the presidential election on November 3rd, 2020. Again, the applicant is Donna Furman of the League of Women Voters of Westford. The dates October 27th to Friday, November 6th. The location in front of the First Parish Church. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Nita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
And
We are.
To
Yep.
Eric, we love seeing Nancy cook, but I think we may want to say goodbye to her for tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, we are at 8 p.m. item, a request by the 35 Town Farm Task Force to approve an updated memorandum of agreement between the Select Board, the Board of Water Commissioners, and the Fire Department. We had discussed this at our last meeting, but as it turned out, the memorandum of agreement that we were presented had not yet been approved by the Water Commissioners. There was, I believe there was one change and one amendment to that agreement from the time we saw it 2 weeks ago until tonight concerning indemnification. And we now have a copy of that. The water commissioners have signed it, and the fire chief has also signed it. So is there any discussion? Jody.
Just for clarification, it wasn't indemnification. It was, we changed the surety bond to another mechanism. It will take a town meeting vote for an appropriation, but that will secure the funds. And there might have been a couple of other language changes. John Giorgio worked with the water commissioners and the other parties and I was in that meeting too. So, but I feel like we have a good, memorandum, and the parties are all comfortable.
Okay. Scott?
I make a motion to accept the member understanding between the water commissioners and the town.
Is there a second?
Second.
Friendly amendment, could we say approve? Could we
Sorry.
say approve instead of accept? Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, our 8:10 p.m. item is a continued public hearing with respect to a dangerous dog hearing concerning the dog Ayla. As I did last time, I am going to recuse myself from this continued public hearing. So it's all yours, Tom.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Greg, can you tell me if I need a motion to resume this public hearing?
Yes, I would recommend that you make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
Okay, so I'd like that motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor? Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Aye. And I believe that where we are, we're re-entering the deliberation phase. We've already had all the testimony. We have a little bit of new information, which is Dan heard. So Greg, if it's appropriate, I think what I would do is ask Greg to join us and share his report. and then we can resume deliberation?
Yes, I believe that would be the appropriate first step.
Okay. Dan, are you out there?
Yes, I am. How's it going?
Good. Good to hear you, Dan.
You too.
So it looks like you had a successful visit. Maybe you can recount what's in your letter.
Yep, absolutely. My meeting and my interaction with Ayla, the existing dog, very peaceful, no aggression at all. They do have a working electric fence, which Ayla does seem to abide by. So, you know, obviously I can't predict any future events or total, you know, overall dog behavior, but from what I can see, Ayla does not present any kind of a public safety threat. I, in my opinion, don't think any further measures need to be taken, and I think the issue was resolved with the relocation of the original dog.
Okay. So Greg, I think the question before us is whether we make a no determination and consider this acceptable, make a determination of nuisance dog or of dangerous dog. Is there anything else that we should consider before we have a little bit of discussion amongst us about what we're deciding?
Well, no, so that's really your first question, and those are your three options. You know, you can make no finding at all and just close the hearing without a finding. You can make a finding that the dog is a nuisance dog, or you can make a finding that the dog is a dangerous dog.
Okay, great. Why don't I open up to discussion with the board? Mark.
Yeah, so Greg, there was one of the requests from the party that was injured was, I think, based on their email, their communication to us, that they were glad to hear everything that's happened thus far, but they did have a request that Ayla not be walked anywhere near their area. And so I was just asking the question of, you know, can you prohibit something like that on a public set of roads when if we find no issue with the dog?
Well, so there's sort of two parts of that question. You know, so in order to issue an order, you have to make the finding that the dog is a nuisance dog or a dangerous dog. Without making one of those two findings, in my opinion, there's no basis for issuing an order. That being said, if you were to make one of those findings, then I do think that it would be a reasonable form of restraint to establish a certain area in which the dog should not be walked, particularly since, you know, there was this one incident in this particular area, which seems to be remote from the area where the dog is ordinarily kept. But, you know, in order for an order like that to be enforceable, you have to first make the finding of nuisance or dangerous.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Scott, did you have a question or comment?
No, that was my question as well. Because so with that in mind, I guess it does seem that the problem child was the male dog has been rehomed, and that Ayla is not a threat. And I think we've had a lot of experience with animal control. They're a pretty good judge of characters of dogs. So I'd be inclined to make no finding.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like the first decision is, do we make a finding of this dog? And it sounds like the advice we're getting is that there's not a need to do that, in which case we don't really have the opportunity to restrict where the dog is walked. Okay. So Greg, I think we need to vote. Or do we just have no finding?
So what the statute specifically says, bear with me for 1 second. Either dismiss the complaint or deem the dog a nuisance dog or a dangerous dog. So my recommendation for the motion would be, I move that the board vote to dismiss the complaint and close the public hearing.
So moved.
Okay, so have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Only discussion is thanks for all the hard work, and thanks for taking the larger part of the corrective action needed. So by dismissing this, we're giving it full respect and appreciate all the hard work, but procedurally we're dismissing it. So with that, I'll call for a vote. Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Aye. So the public session is now closed, and it's back to you, Andrea.
Actually, you need a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, okay. I thought the motion.
The clerk was going to pop in, but it happened so fast I was caught off guard. So
I thought the motion included closing the public hearing. I thought that's what Greg told us the motion was.
I thought that it included that as well.
Well,
Dismiss
as
the
the
complaint
clerk, I
and
can
close
tell you
the
that
hearing.
it didn't, and so I moved to close the public hearing.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor. Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Aye. Now, Andrea.
Okay, we are at old and new business. Fiscal year 2021 financial update. Dan, hello, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're all doing well. We're getting a little punchy, but we're doing well.
Okay, I'll try and make this brief. Let's see. So we have the slides in the packet that Eric, if you want to bring those up, that'd be great. You can just show the first slide. I just want to give you an update on where we are with the local revenue and where we are with the year-end process. So we'll go right down the list here for our tax base, so the general fund. We should, for our new growth for next year, we should be pretty close to our projection of 1.23 million. I spoke with the assessor several times, and we should be right in the ballpark. Next section here is state aid. We have just a minor deficit in state aid in FY20 as due to charter school reimbursement, so not a huge deal there. But FY21 is where we have the most unknown and what's causing us the most angst, I'd say. Right now,
Dan, can I just interrupt you for a minute? Eric, can you make,
sure.
Eric, please make the slide bigger. We can't see it. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So for state aid for FY21, the day after town meeting, essentially, the state came out with guidelines that they're going to level fund state aid for July and August because they have not heard from the federal government yet. So the projection here has that level funding going out throughout the entire year for FY21, which causes about a $215,000 deficit. Now, the issue is we don't know if there's going to be further cuts after the, it all depends on what the federal government does. The House did pass the HEROES Act last month, I believe. That act is now sitting with the Senate, which from what I hear, does not have a whole lot of chance to pass in its current form, but they could be working on some other sort of funding for cities and towns nationwide. The HEROES Act would provide the town with just under $12 million over the next 2 years, which would be excellent for us, but I'm not banking on that at this point. So as we learn more about that, we'll be sure to share updates. Going down a little bit to the local revenue, amazingly in FY20, we actually hit our budget target, which is unbelievable given the circumstances in the fourth quarter there. So I'm just going to share a couple of facts with you about what happened. Motor vehicle excise, we actually missed our target by about 152,000. As you know, the Board of Selectmen decided to delay taxes from May 1st to June 1st to help those communities struggling to pay their taxes. And the cause of that was that we delayed our demand bills until July. And so we did not have that notice go out to residents. So we didn't collect that revenue in FY20. However, we are expected to collect that revenue in 21 as people are paying those past two bills. As I've said before, the Department of Revenue doesn't allow us to budget more in the next fiscal year than what we raised in the previous fiscal year. So that's why you see the level funded amount for FY21, which is about $246,000 less than what we had anticipated before the entire COVID situation happened. The hotel and motel excise and the meals excise, they were about double what we had originally projected. As you can see here, the meals excise is only about 14,000 below what we had budgeted for the year. So that's, kudos to the restaurants that adapted and did delivery and all these other things to keep their businesses going. So, I updated the projection for FY20 and that helped cut some of the local revenue deficit. Other things here like penalties and interest on taxes. We had that one huge payoff of the tax deferral, which brought in an influx of $150,000. Our licenses and permits were very strong in FY20 because of the Hanover projects and some other projects in town. And we're expecting that to go down in FY21. You see the 850,000 there because those Hanover projects are wrapping up in the first quarter. And all we're missing so far is the June interest payment for the general fund. So we should see that $7,000 figure $7,000 figure go up slightly at the end. So for FY21, where we had our original projection, it's about $488,000 lower than what we originally expected. So the last piece of this is the enterprise funds. The board decided to allow the kids club to occur starting in July, and that actually brought in an influx of cash. The deficit in FY21 that we had originally projected was about 250,000. We were able to lower that to 180,000. And a lot of that goes along with Jim Duane and his controlling the budget very carefully as well during this time. So that was good management by him as well. So overall, with the change to state aid and the updated local revenue, we're looking at a current deficit of about 883,000 heading into next year, which again, that will change depending on the what happens with state aid. So tomorrow is July 15th. That's a statutory day for our last warrant. People or departments have to get in their encumbrance letters to us. The schools typically do that in the beginning of August, and then we should have a clear picture on what our reserves will be moving forward from that point. So that's my bridge update for finances. I'll open up to questions if you have any.
Anybody have questions? Yep, Mark?
Yeah, so Dan, just so as I understand it, the level state aid was based for July and August. Right.
That's correct.
This 83 is at that time to the extent.
I'm sorry, Mark, you're breaking up a bit.
Mark, you're breaking up. I don't know if somebody is not on mute or something, but you're breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
It's still sort of broken up. It sounds like you're, speaking through a shower curtain.
I am. How'd you know?
Okay, we can hear you now. Sounds great.
Okay, so it's just July and August that the state has determined that it's a level. So I think this is great work, and I applaud everybody in all the town departments. But 883, I think, is got a lot of risk in it, if you would agree.
Some mild understatement.
We are continuing our spending and hiring freezes. We're waiting to hear what the final number is, but at this point, this is the best information we have. So,
yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Tom?
It's a little bit of a process point related to Mark's question. So I think our plan, it sounds like our plan, you can tell me if I'm wrong, and this is really a question for the whole select board. So we expect to continue along this until we get notification of what state aid will look like. And we don't have a clear timeline at this point. Is that right, Dan, about what will happen to state aid?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is maybe August we might have some information, but until that point, we really don't know how to proceed forward with our projections. So
yeah, so it might be August that we might say, okay, we may have to take the unfortunate step of saying, great, we're doing a great job so far with the hiring freeze. That's totally appropriate. Spending control is very appropriate. But if in August we get updated forecasts that have a more significant reduction, we'll have to get back together and talk about how to make adjustments. Okay.
I think if you remember, Bill and I met with all of you in the school committee. We do have a plan at different levels, different tiers. So we'll be quick to be able to react, but we will come back to you as soon as we have those numbers.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
The next item is consider approval of a license agreement with Lee Milks Petroleum Inc. and Getty Properties Corp. to allow permission to enter 275 Groton Road to perform environmental and geotechnical testing at 262 Groton Road. Jody is, oh, yeah, do you all, that's fine. Is there a second?
Second.
Tom, you're on mute. Okay. Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We have a request from Environment Massachusetts to sign a letter in support of transitioning Massachusetts to 100% renewable energy. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yep, Mark?
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody is online or has answers to this. So I have a couple of questions if somebody has the answers to. And the first one is related to whether we know what the cost impact of moving towards this is on the average resident.
Sorry. So Mark, you did ask me that question late this afternoon, but no, I do not have any answer for you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Is anybody from Environment Massachusetts online?
I am not aware. I'm not aware that they are. I know a couple residents reached out and said they supported this, but I really can't answer that question tonight.
Okay, so that's one of my questions. The second question is whether we know how many jobs are going to be gained or lost as a result of going to this.
I think the answer is no. Jody is shaking her head.
Okay, so without answer, I don't have enough information to be able to take a position on this.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to seek those answers and bring it back to our next meeting if you want. Again, I wasn't able to get those answers late today, so.
Aren't we under a time deadline? I seem to remember that the letter asked that we file any letter of support that we have by July 1st.
Yes, I did ask them on that, and they said that they would add your signature to their letter if you voted in favor after the fact, so.
And do we know if we wait until July 28th, if that's too late?
I didn't get that impression that it was too late, but again, I can ask that too tomorrow.
So what's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to vote on this tonight? Do you want to hold till the 28th? Yeah, Tom?
So with respect to Mark's questions, I think those might be pretty difficult questions to get in a conclusive way. So at least my opinion would be that what we're supporting here is this legislation and the intent it represents, and so I would feel comfortable moving forward for a vote.
Okay, well, Scott?
I don't know about the state, but normally if this was federal legislation, there would have been an economic impact study done. So if there actually was, it's possible.
Well, there is a motion and a second on the floor, so let's, why don't we take the vote and see where we land, okay? So all in favor and supporting.
I think they raised their hand.
I'm sorry, Anita, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Jody, is it realistic to get an answer to Mark's questions? Like, is it would you know where to go? I guess. I'm sure you can get an answer. I just wondering
Yeah, I know.
how
I
labor intensive
know.
it is.
Excuse me. I would know where to go. I don't know what the answer will be, but I am happy to attempt to get that. I don't know. I can't answer that. Oh, wait a minute. Let me hold on. I'm getting text. Nope. It's about a different item. You already voted. So, I mean, I'll try my best. If you'd like to defer to 728, if anybody has any additional questions, I will do my best to get answers.
I guess if there's a motion and a second, so, but were you gonna say something?
I'll say if it's not an urgent decision, I would, I guess, vote no on my second and then ask to reconsider on the 28th.
Or we can, or whoever made the motion, and I can't remember right now, can withdraw the motion.
I think it was me, and I will, out of respect for trying to get the additional information, I'll withdraw my motion and we can postpone it to the 28th.
And Anita, I think you seconded it, so will you withdraw your second?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I withdraw. I don't know what the right word is.
Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Andrew. So I think it's interesting that this is brought to us also by somebody who chose not to, for whatever reason, be on this. So I would also encourage whoever is bringing this to us for a vote be available for questions as well.
Yeah. Okay. Jody or Eric can reach out to the individual to be available at our next meeting.
Happy to do so.
All right. We have a request to increase the town and school safety task force membership. Tom and Scott.
So the task force is at an exciting time where we're trying to take some of the inputs that we've had and sort of incorporate more voices and getting to a series of recommendations. And so the proposal is that we add 5 community citizen at large positions to the existing slate. If you're interested, it was in your packet, but if you're interested, we can bring up the existing voting members of that task force. But I think it would give us an opportunity to bring additional voices at the point where we're trying to take the various school and SRO and community needs proposals and expose them to a broader range of voices, and then ultimately form that set of recommendations. And Scott, if there's anything I've missed.
I was going to say that when we first formed this task force, we always had envisioned expanding it to include citizens at large after we got them through a certain point of technical issues, and that we're now beyond the point of technology and well, not beyond, but beyond those decisions at least. There's still money to pay for them in the future, but think about the staffing and that kind of policies that might result from that. I think we want a broader audience than just the current staff and board members. So hence, I think the time to bring in, as we always plan to, some additional resident voices.
Mark?
Yeah, so I think it's smart to do that. I think the conundrum is going to be, when various department heads and people involved in the various other departments, I think it becomes an easy choice to figure out who should be involved. If you're trying now to expand that to get, other voices in there, selecting 5 that represent the diversity of what you're trying to get to is not going to be an easy thing. So, for example, if you've talked about SROs and you want community voice on SROs, well, there are 2 very polarizing sides of the pros and cons of an SRO. And so finding 5 people that represent the diversity of thought that goes into some of those things you're trying to bring in, I think is going to be extremely difficult. So while I support the need or the desire to expand it, when it comes to choosing who those 5 are going to be, I don't know how you're going to do it.
Well, we aren't, you are.
Yeah.
No, seriously, this task force was
It's the board who appoints, Mark, so it's up to
Yeah, no,
us.
so are we going to get the opportunity to interview? I mean, who's bringing the selection to us, and with what kind of information? It just, this is, we're right in, in the gut of everything that's going on.
Scott, you want to?
It'll work like every other board or task force that we appoint, that they'll submit a application of citizen interest to the town manager. She'll put them in our packet. We'll make a decision based upon that information, and if we choose to interview, we I guess could do so. That's the chair's decision, but we'll have the usual information from the usual process.
Anita?
I know that there were some citizen activity forms that were submitted that were included in tonight's packet, and I just wonder, could we encourage some of those people to resubmit citizen activity forms where they might be able to include more narrative? Because I think there were some that didn't have very much information there, and if we do move forward with increasing the membership size, then or the task force size, then maybe I think that would be helpful.
So, okay, Tom?
So we'd be happy to do that. In fact, we asked a few follow-up questions to a few of the applicants, and those responses didn't make it into your packet this time, but we'll make sure to include those. So if it's a little bit light on content, we'll ask a follow-up question. What's your interest? What's your background? What do you want to bring to this? And then share that response.
So my question is, were these openings advertised, or were they put on the town website? Were they advertised through that and the other methodologies that we use, or was this just through word of mouth? Jody?
Great.
No, it was not advertised yet because the Board of Selectmen or Select Board had not authorized increasing the membership yet. So I believe we discussed this at the last TSSTF meeting, and perhaps this was our intent. And I think some of these people were either paying attention to that or participating and then did. So we will definitely, my newsletter's going out this week. We will get it in that and get it out there. And, sometimes.
I mean, that's my point, is that I think the first step is that we need to, as a board, approve expanding the membership by whatever number we decide. And then the second step is to gather applications and information that can be in our packets. And then the third step is that we appoint new and additional members.
The only thing I might add is sometimes committees do make recommendations to the board on who they would like you to appoint. And I guess I want to be clear whether you would like the TSSTF to do that step too, or whether you would just like to consider everyone.
Well, I'm of the opinion, I mean, the TSSTF can certainly make its recommendations, but I'm also of the opinion that, everybody gets considered and everybody gets a fair shot. Tom?
There's a question in the questions about eligibility for participation in one of these task force, and the specific question is, if a student under the age of 18 wished to be considered, could they apply? And so I don't know, Jody, if there's any requirement or any restriction on who can apply if they're a resident.
I don't know whether there would be a restriction as for voting if they're under 18. I'll have to look into that. They could certainly participate. I'll check on whether or not they could actually vote.
Thanks.
All right, so I think at least for tonight, the decision is whether or not we want to expand the committee, and if so, do we want to expand it by 5 members or some other number? So I think I sensed agreement from the board that we were all in agreement that we of expanding the committee and adding for the purpose of adding citizen participants. And I don't know, just 5 seems a reasonable number to me. I don't know if anybody disagrees with that or not.
Nope.
All right, is there a motion?
So I'll make the motion to create 5 additional citizen and at large voting seats for the town and school safety task force.
I'll second the motion, just observing that even if we pick 5 and there's 20 applicants, the other 15 is certainly open to come and voice their opinions. This wouldn't be voting, that's all.
Is there a second to Tom's motion?
I seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's getting late. All right, all in favor, Scott,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have a request to fill 1 vacancy for registrar. And I believe is the information in our packet, as Patty Doobie told us, it needs to be a Democrat. And we have an application from John Ricketson, who the Democratic Town Committee is recommending. So is there a motion to approve John as a registrar for the town of Westford?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, Scott,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
and Tom?
Aye.
Aye. And finally, on under old and new business, we have a request to approve 2020 annual reappointments for committee and board members as listed in the meeting packet. Is there a motion?
So
So
moved.
Second? Okay. All those in favor, Scott,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Aye, and aye. We have minutes for approval, May 12th, 2020 and May 26th, 2020, both regular sessions. And can I have a motion to approve and release?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Scott,
Aye.
Anita?
Abstain.
Yeah, you can abstain.
Yeah.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Okay. Any board reports or updates? Okay, seeing none. Jody, town manager's report.
Yes, so I have some contracts we're asking you to approve. Woodard and Curran for licensed site professional services related to perchlorate cleanup at $50,500. Tyler Technologies for Munis support, the amount of $128,818.18. Patriot Properties for software support for our assessors department at $11,680. And then purchase orders, Apple for Apple computers in the school department in the amount of $157,931. Tritech Software Systems for computer-aided dispatch software in the amount of $27,276.25. Logmein for virtual meeting software in the amount of $14,298. CDWG for Sophos antivirus in the amount of $10,950. Process distributors, 4,800 pounds of constant chlor plus dry. Briquettes in the amount of $11,592.
Okay, anybody have any questions about any of these? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at correspondence. And before we waive, I entertain a motion for waiving the correspondence. I want to announce that Westford has been designated as a housing choice community. And while it may sound benign, actually what it does for the town is that it qualifies us for an ability to apply for capital grant programs for up to $250,000. We also will receive special consideration in 9 state grant programs, such as Mass Works, Complete Streets, something that we have applied for in the past, and Green Communities funding, also something that we have applied for in the past. So for all of town staff who has and volunteers who have worked to make Westford a housing choice community, thank you very much. Hopefully we're going to be able to take advantage of some of these grant opportunities moving forward. So with that, is there a motion to waive reading of correspondence?
Moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Motion to adjourn into executive session.
right, okay, is
Not
there a
to adjourn.
second?
Second.
Okay,
Actually,
So,
with we will not return to regular session.
right.
But
So
You
I'm
got to
sorry.
read, you have to say why we're going in executive session.
So we're going into
Purpose.
executive session to discuss a potential appeal by the planning board of a recent decision by the zoning board of appeals approving 21 units of age-restricted housing at 0 and 37 Carlisle Road as an open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigation position. And
Inviting.
where is the second page of my agenda?
Do you want me to consider a tentative agreement with IAFF for fiscal year 21?
Yes, thank you. And we will not be coming back out of executive session. So with that, Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Yes.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye.
Scott, take it over for me.
I thought you said Scott, I'm sorry.
The new Mark.
So we all know, we all have to sign off now and then sign back in for executive session, okay? So good night, everybody in Westford. Thank you for joining us. Everybody stay safe. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.